Hello true crimers. Today we going be talking about the McDonald's Massacre. One of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. That lasted for 77 brutal minutes. James Oliver Huberty was the perpetrator behind the San Isidro McDonald's Massacre. James Oliver Huberty was born on October 11, 1942, in Canton, Ohio, to Earl Vincent Huberty and Eichel Huberty. James was raised in a household that placed a strong emphasis on religious values. However, his childhood was deeply impacted when his mother, Eichel, abandoned the family to pursue missionary work with a Southern Baptist organization. She left the family when James was about 7 or 8 years old, leading to a profound sense of loss and abandonment. Also around that time, James' father decided to buy a farm in the countryside, and they moved away to that farm where James wasn't used to. During James' childhood, he went through challenges. At the age of 3, James contracted polio, a debilitating disease that affected his mobility. Although he recovered after receiving treatment, the illness left him with a permanent limp, which became a source of embarrassment and self-consciousness throughout his life. His physical ailment may have contributed to his feelings of being different or isolated from other children. With the departure of his mother, it created a void in James's life. He struggled to form close emotional bonds, and the trauma of his mother's abandonment may have played a role in his difficulty with emotional regulation and interpersonal relationships as he grew older. James attended local schools in Canton, Ohio. His school years were reportedly marked by loneliness and social difficulties. Due to his limp and the sense of being different, he was often seen as an outsider. There were no reports of him excelling academically, nor did he participate in any activities. In his late teens, Huberty pursued training in funeral services. He attended a mortuary science program in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which led to a brief career as an undertaker and embalmer. However, he eventually decided that this profession was not for him, finding it emotionally taxing and not a suitable long-term career. During that time, James met his future wife, Etna Markland, while he was studying mortuary science in Pittsburgh. Like James, Etna had experienced a difficult upbringing. She was described as being strong-willed and intelligent, with a sharp personality that attracted James. The two connected over their similar backgrounds of economic hardship and challenges. They began dating and developed a close relationship, sharing a fascination with survivalism and unconventional beliefs about the world. James and Etna's relationship was marked by shared interests and a sense of companionship, both feeling like outsiders in mainstream society. The couple married in 1965, with James being 23 years old at the time. Their marriage, while relatively stable in the early years, would later be affected by financial stress, relocation, and James's deteriorating mental state. James and Etna faced economic difficulties. James's early career as an embalmer did not provide sufficient income, and the family moved frequently as James sought better job opportunities. Though James did not have a formal mental health diagnosis during his childhood or early adult years, he was described as moody and prone to periods of depression. His early experiences of loss, isolation, and disappointment may have contributed to these struggles. His meeting with Etna provided him with companionship, but his underlying problems remained unresolved, eventually contributing to the tragic events of 1984. On July 17, 1984, the day before the massacre, James believed he was struggling with his mental health. He called a San Diego mental health clinic, requesting an appointment. The receptionist reportedly noted that he did not seem like an immediate threat, and his request was not classified as urgent. James became frustrated and reportedly told his wife that society had their chance to help him, indicating that he no longer expected anyone to intervene. On July 18, 1984, the day was a normal day. John took his wife and daughters to the San Diego Zoo, seemingly to think that he was in good spirits. During the visit, he mentioned to his wife that he was expecting something to happen, but his wife didn't know what that meant. Upon returning home, he told his wife he was going out to hunt humans. John left his home armed with a 9mm Uzi, a shotgun, and a pistol, and he drove to a McDonald's restaurant in San Isidro at 4 p.m. At that time, James Huberty would do horrific things for 77 minutes long. I'ma give y'all a timeline of what happened inside the McDonald's. At 4 o'clock, James would enter the McDonald's with the 3 firearms he left his house with. He also carried a bag filled with hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Upon entering, Huberty aimed a shotgun at a 16-year-old employee named John Arnold, saying, "Freeze." However, the shotgun initially malfunctioned. Arnold later testified that he thought it was a twisted joke. After fixing the shotgun, James fired into the ceiling, signaling the start of his rampage. At this point, patrons and staff realized the seriousness of the situation and tried to hide or flee. At 4:05, James immediately began shooting people inside the restaurant, starting with a group near the counter. Carlos Reyes, an 8-month-old baby, was the first fatality, shot in his stroller while sitting near the counter with his mother and older sister. James continued to target customers and employees indiscriminately, shouting, "I'm going to kill you all." A customer made a 911 call, but due to a communication error, the dispatcher mistakenly sent officers to a different McDonald's. From 4:10 to 4:20, several victims had been killed or wounded. James moved through the restaurant, shooting anyone he encountered. He particularly targeted groups of people trying to hide in booths and under tables. Several people managed to flee from the building or hide in various spots, including storage areas and behind machinery in the kitchen. James shot several employees and customers, including children. Some victims were shot multiple times. At 4:21, police received another 911 call, which correctly reported that the shooting was happening at the San Isidro McDonald's on San Isidro Boulevard. The first officers arrived on the scene a few minutes later and immediately realized the scale of the situation as gunfire continued to be heard from inside. At 4:30, officers initially set up a perimeter around the restaurant, attempting to contain the situation. Due to the heavy firepower James was using, law enforcement did not initially enter the building, fearing for their safety and that of the hostages. SWAT teams and police snipers were called in, and surrounding streets were closed off. News of the shooting spread, and a crowd of onlookers began to gather at a distance from the restaurant. From 4:30 to 5 o'clock, James continued his rampage, taking aim at individuals outside the building through the restaurant windows, injuring a teenager and a young woman walking nearby. Law enforcement was now fully aware that multiple people were still inside, and more units arrived to assist. James moved around the restaurant, pausing only to reload his weapons and drink from a soda cup he picked up from a nearby table. At 5 o'clock, a SWAT sniper, positioned at an elevated spot nearby, managed to get a partial view of James through one of the restaurant's windows. Police officers on the scene had been authorized to use lethal force to end the attack and save the remaining hostages. Officers tried negotiating with James but could not establish communication due to the chaotic nature of the scene and James' unpredictable movements. At 5:05, James was observed reloading his Uzi near the center of the restaurant. SWAT sniper Chuck Foster, positioned on the roof of a nearby post office, took aim and fired a single .308 caliber round from his rifle. The bullet struck James in the chest, piercing his aorta and killing him instantly. James' killing spree lasted approximately 77 minutes. 21 people were killed, including victims as young as 8 months old and as old as 74. The victims represented a mix of local residents, including Mexican and American nationals. 19 others were wounded, with injuries ranging from minor to life-threatening. Law enforcement immediately secured the building and began clearing survivors, escorting them to ambulances and trauma centers. James' motivation was that he believed the government and society were to blame for his failures. He was convinced that a nuclear war was imminent and often talked about survivalism and societal collapse. Also, his financial struggles, especially after the loss of his job as a welding inspector, contributed significantly to his frustration. The massacre shocked the community and the nation, prompting widespread discussions on gun violence, mental health, and law enforcement response tactics. McDonald's Corporation temporarily closed all of its San Diego locations out of respect for the victims, and the San Isidro restaurant was eventually demolished. In its place, a memorial was established at Southwestern College with 21 hexagonal pillars to commemorate each victim. Let's talk about the aftermath of the massacre for the Huberty family. After the massacre, James' wife, Etna Huberty, and their 2 daughters, Zelia and Cassandra, faced intense public scrutiny and backlash. They were harassed and ostracized in the community and eventually changed their last names to avoid further attention and harassment. Etna stated that she had no prior knowledge of her husband's violent intentions. She described James as a man increasingly troubled by unemployment, financial difficulties, and health problems, which she believed might have contributed to his actions. Etna filed multiple lawsuits following the massacre. One suit was against McDonald's Corporation and the restaurant's security practices. She claimed that McDonald's had failed to ensure the safety of its patrons, though this case was ultimately dismissed. Another suit targeted Cox Manufacturing, the maker of the Uzi used in the shooting, arguing the company bore some responsibility for making such a deadly weapon accessible to civilians. This case was also dismissed. Etna and her daughters eventually moved back to Canton, Ohio, where they attempted to live more privately. I'm going to name all of the 22 victims who tragically passed on that saddened day. First was 8-month-old Carlos Reyes and his mother 26-year-old Claudia Reyes. After was 18-year-old Jackie Wright, 18-year-old Margarita Padilla and her fiancé 19-year-old Jose Rubio, 11-year-old David Delgado, 22-year-old Gloria Gonzalez, 31-year-old Blythe Herrera, 45-year-old Hugo Vasquez, 19-year-old Maria Silva and her friend 18-year-old Gloria Ramirez, 18-year-old Michelle Carncross, 24-year-old Guadalupe Del Rio, 25-year-old Victor Rivera, 26-year-old Maria Badillo, 19-year-old Elsa Fierro, 31-year-old Aristelci Vargas, 74-year-old Miguel Aloa, and his wife 74. Year-old Ida Velasquez. The McDonald's massacre remains one of the deadliest massacres in U.S. history. Rest in peace to all the people who passed during this disaster, and I hope they families was able to continue in their life and what they did and stood for. Thank you all for watching this. I would appreciate it if you can subscribe, like, comment, and tell your other friends to come on and join the true crimers. Thank you all.